Hey, what's up, comrades? So we're back with some Alpha Flight. Yep, Alpha Flight. This is Alpha Flight takes a little divergent in being like a team book. Essentially, we just get like origin stories and these like side stories about all the different characters. We spent a lot of time with Aurora, not Aurora Storm, but Aurora, who is that's her. Wait, her real name's like Jean Baubert or something, some French crazy name. Anyway, she is North Star, who is a little more famous than hers twin sister. So in issue number 7 of Alpha Flight, we start off with Aurora or Jean being in like therapy or whatever, while Jean, he's John Paul. Wait, yeah, he's John Paul. She is Jean. It's like super confusing. I'm just gonna call them by their superhero names. So North Star and Aurora. So Aurora's got like kind of like a split personality disorder, which we learn more about in a couple issues with her origin story. But she's like a strict, like very Karen-looking lady who works at like an orphanage, or like not even an orphan. Yeah, I think it is kind of an orphanage, like an orphanage Catholic school for young ladies. And North Star is like a famous skier, and he's brash and he's super gay. So they we get like a recap of who they are, their superpowers, how they can both fly and they both do like these things, and then they can combine their powers, and how Aurora is like exceedingly outgoing and lusty towards Sasquatch. When she's in like her true form, but her like forced form is this like school marm. Anyway, so they're chatting and walking around, and oops, the battery on this thing's about to die. And then Aurora's purse gets snapped or snagged up by some douchebag, and she like races and like takes it back from him, and kind of like she bounces back and forth between these two forms. And the Aurora form is like very sensual and very like risque and very aggressive, right? Anyway, so when her purse gets stolen, she transforms into like her other form, and then she goes and knocks him out, and they go talk to the police, and they meet. Who is this gentleman? They meet Raymond, who's a friend of North Star's. And they chit chat about like the things that are going with. Sorry, Jean Marie or Jean Paul. Jeez. Anyway, he is doing some sort of stuff for North Star, and they're meeting up with him, and then his daughter like Danielle comes in, and they're all chit chatting, and they're like close friends and whatnot. But meanwhile, there's some douchebag who wants to. Oh my gosh, I forgot. I need to switch out from CBR. Go away. It's like wants to do ads. It's awful. Anyway, these guys come to get him, the doctor guy Belmont, and so they push in. The Danielle and North Star get knocked over, and they grab Aurora, thinking that Aurora is the daughter of the doctor, and then they grab Raymond too. And then this guy who's in the car is like Death Hand, who is the person that the purse snatcher like works for, puts his hands on Raymond's face, and it causes him to just like die instantly. And then they snag up Raymond, or they snag up Aurora, thinking that that is Raymond's daughter. And this guy, Death Hand, wants something to do with something about, I think he wants the cafe that Raymond owns. And Raymond like won't sell or something. It's some like really petty like gangster shit that's going on. Meanwhile, we get like completely unconnected over in like Winnipeg, which is somewhere in Canada. I think it's in Manitoba. At some mall, there's some guy walking around looking at stuff, talking to people, and then he runs into this like beautiful woman. This guy used to be a part of like, I want to say Omega Flight. I don't know if it mentions it here, but there's like Alpha Flight, obviously Alpha. No, not Omega Flight, like Beta or Gamma Flight, like one of the sub units the Canadian government was like working on. Anyway, so there's some shady stuff going on with that, and then we get the origins, right? So this origin story, the next one focuses on. Well, this might be the first origin. No, this is this one because we did the shaman already, and what's his name? Hudson. So this one focuses on Snowbird, I think is her name. Anyway, so we get some guys just like digging up like First Nations stuff, or whatever they call it in Canada, and they find this. He finds this like beautiful like bracelet or whatever, and then he uses it, or tiara, and he uses it and he follows and he finds like these ancient spirits and of like Canada or whatever. There's Nelvana, the goddess of the Northern Lights and stuff, and then this like beautiful woman's like, I'm going to grant you one night of pleasure so that you can impregnate me, so I can have a child, and so they have the sex, and then he wakes up and it's been like, it's been a long time. 9 years. It's been 9 years, and he's like losing his mind. And they're like, "Hey man, you got tundra madness." And he's like, "It can't be 9 years. Something." And he like goes crazy and runs off and runs away. So that's Nightbird's dad. He's gone forever. Meanwhile, Michael Two Youngman, who's shaman, like he rolls up and he finds the woman that got like knocked up by the guy, and she's like, "Oh, I need your help. I need you to take this child," and like she's something potential, something, and it's Snowbird. And so then Two Young Men takes this girl instead of raising his own daughter, who he left with like Hudson's wife, his family, and starts raising her instead. And that's the end of this issue. So issue 8 picks up right where we left off. We get a quick little recap as North Star is like flying to find his sister, about how his buddy, the doctor, or I don't know if he's a doctor, Raymond, and he got kidnapped, or he got killed by this guy, and then Aurora got kidnapped because Dead Hand or Deadly Ernest? Yeah, his name's Deadly Ernest. Thought that it was Raymond's daughter, and he wants to take over his business or whatever because he's just like a 2-bit mobster at the end of the day. He recalls how they took Raymond to the doctor and that he was killed and murdered, and that he's super concerned about getting revenge but also rescuing his sister. So he crashes into Deadly Ernest's estate. It's like this nice place somewhere in like Ernst St. Ives or something. Anyway, he's walking around, there's nobody really there, and then he's like, what is going on? Meanwhile, there's this chica, and we know it's a chick because she's got a nice rack. Even though her costume, it's almost like a Spawn / Spider-Man costume. Like, it's a red with this huge ridiculous cape, but it's got like kind of the Spider-Man mask, so we can't see anything about her except that, again, it's like skin tight, so we can, leave nothing to the imagination necessarily. And she refers to herself as Nemesis, and she's after Deadly Ernest. So back to North Star. He bursts in the door and sees Aurora flirting with Saint or Deadly Ernest and talking about stuff, and she's still pretending to be like the daughter of Raymond. And then when she tells the guy that North Star is her cousin, so they, instead of killing him, they carry him off, and he wakes up a little bit later and there's a sword to his neck, and he's like, what the heck? And it's this Nemesis chick. And so they talk about how she wants to get revenge or kill this guy, and North Star is like, okay, yeah, let me get out of here. And so he starts trying to undo the lock, and she just like cuts it off like a crazy person. Meanwhile, somewhere else on the estate, Aurora is having dinner with Deadly Ernest, and they're talking about how like during World War I, he was hit by something out in the fields. Yeah, he got hit by something really bad, and everyone was dead. And then he was like dying, and there was like mustard gas and stuff, and it was seeping into his lungs. But somehow he survived the mustard gas because death came. You got to remember, in Marvel, death is like a literal. I think she's a woman too, like a literal actual person. Like it's like they have these things, not the Eternals. I'm trying to remember exactly what they're called, but you have like death and fate and stuff, and they're like real. And so he like made a deal with, let's see, if he felt the terrible corruption fill his lungs, felt it burn his flesh and his signs, he saw death smiling, her death's head smile, and he rejected her touch, spurred her embrace, cursed her with every fiber of his being. And then he found out that he was alone. And then he found out he had like the Midas's touch, but instead of turning people into gold, it just killed them. So he has to wear gloves because anytime he touches somebody, it kills them, because death thought it was funny, I guess. And then Aurora was like, holy cow, World War I was a long time ago, which is, yeah, like, like Marvel continuity kind of takes place when the comics are released, so it's like completely jacked up. But this came out in like the 70s or 80s. I think this came out in the 80s, actually, 80s. And he's like, yes, and it's only made me stronger. Hoo, 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 hoo. And then Nemesis and North Star show up, and they're like, ta-da! And Nemesis says something about father, and North Star's like, what? And Aurora's like, oh, good, you finally came. I'm ready to join you guys and fight this guy. And so they have a little fight, and Deadly Ernest tries, he grabs Nemesis in the face. He's pretty tough. And because she's wearing a mask, it doesn't do anything. And so she ends up cutting off his arm, and then she ends up cutting him to like pieces, like tiny little pieces. And then North Star grabs her, is like, oh, Danielle, what have you done? And Danielle is the daughter of Raymond, and she's like, I am not Danielle, I am Nemesis. And he pulls off the mask and sees who's behind it, and is like, uh, because it's not Danielle. What? Who's this Nemesis chick, and why is she here? I don't know. We don't find out for a while. And then Nemesis knocks North Star out. And then she's like, Aurora, you want to fight me too? And Aurora's like, whoa, 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 chill, babe. And like, back up. It's all good. As the Nemesis takes off. Jean Paul's okay. He wakes up. And so him and Aurora like fly out of there. And they head over to Danielle, who's hanging out at Raymond's place. And Aurora calls her out as being the person who hooked up with with Deadly Ernest to have him kill her father so that she could take over the place. And she's like, oh no. And so she starts to run, and Aurora's so hot. But she like knocks her the fuck out and is like, you're going to jail, babe. And so the police come, they take her off. Let's see, North Star and let's see, Aurora and Aurora Star are flying away. And then North Star and Aurora get to kind of like a spat because North Star's like, okay, what is he? He's like commenting on how like he wasn't worried about Aurora necessarily, and the reason why he thought Danielle was Nemesis instead. And he mentions that he thinks that when he saw that she was okay, he was like, oh, you must have fucked that guy. And then Aurora's like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah, I mean, you hooked up with Sasquatch. Like, that's gross. Saying apparently you're into like gross men. And she's like, how about you go fuck yourself? And he's like, what? And she's like, don't ever talk to me again. And he flies off, and he's like, no, don't leave me alone. It's like, bro, you got what you asked for. Being an asshole to your sister, bro. And that wraps up that like mini story, which is pretty much what this whole like the dead what is it, the guy who put together this stuff calls it like the Deadly being Earnest, or like it's anyway, it's just some kind of like arc where we get like a lot more character development with all the characters, which I like. It's pretty good. Anyway, so the next so at the end of this and then end of each one of these issues we get like the origin story. So we're back to Snowbird. It's a little bit later. She's a little bit more grown up. We got Heather is visiting. Heather and Vindicator are visiting Shaman. I hate saying his full name. It's so stupid sounding. like Dr. Two Youngsman. And they're like, hey, what's up? And we're so glad, and something. And so Heather worked with Michael. Oh, that's right. They gave his first name. Good. Michael Two Youngsman, and introduces him to her boy, who is James, right? Vindicator. And then Snowbird walks up, and she's going by the name Narya or whatever. And she's like, I am not Narya. That is the name this gentleman gave to me. And she's got like her crazy, sexy eyes and all that stuff. And so then we see Heather and James, like after they coitus, like in Michael's house, just kind of chilling and talking about stuff, talking about how kind of creepy she looked and how she looked like she was blind and stuff. And then Heather hears some noise outside the house, and she goes out and sees Narya, like naked Snowbird, wandering around. And so she follows her a bit and then sees her transform into a bird and is like, oh my gosh. And then so she brings it up with James and Michael. And he's like, yes, she's a metamorph. She shape changes, something, blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about like her origin story, like the goddess of like the woods or the North Aurora or whatever, or the Aurora Borealis. She's like half goddess and whatever. And then James is like, well, we're starting this new department in Canada, and I think it'd be good if you guys join. And it's like, ta-da, they joined. Good job. And that's issue number 8. All right, next up we focus on said Sasquatch, right? So we start off, there's like this cosmic ray research station out in the middle of somewhere, Canada. And we picked up with God, I hate these names. Lankowski, who is Sasquatch. I'm just going to refer to him as Sasquatch. And they're doing some research. His whole thing is like cosmic rays. He's kind of like a Bruce Banner, but Canadian. We get more of the origin story a little bit later, but things are going all right. They're like running some stuff and doing something, and then all of a sudden, this creature teleports in, and it looks like the Thing from Fantastic Four. And they're like, holy cow. So they head out there, and everyone's like, oh man, he's so big and heavy. How are we going to move him? And Sasquatch is like, that's okay. Watch this. So he he turns into Sasquatch, which Sasquatch is like a big Hulk-like creature, only he's covered in fur and stuff. So it picks up the Thing, brings him inside. There's some sort of doctor just hanging out. And he's going to examine him while everyone else goes out and like finishes their stuff. So while the doctor is like, look, he was able to get some blood from him, from the Thing. And he's looking at it. It's like, wait a second, this isn't right. And then whoop, he's dead. Meanwhile, Langowski's flirting with some intern or whatever. He's like, here's the whole thing is like, he was like a linebacker in college and he's like super smart. And, he's like a big strong guy. Even before he became Sasquatch. So they head back. Everyone hears a scream. They head inside. They see the doctor like all burned up and dead. And there's like a hole torn in the wall. And they're like, could this have been the Thing? That doesn't make sense. Like, what's going on with that? And so Langowski's like, hey, look, so it looks like someone came in, kidnapped the Thing, and then took off after killing this guy. So I'm going to go check it out. So he wanders. He's like, oh, this doesn't seem right. And then looking back at like the research station, all of a sudden it's like, boom, the whole thing explodes. He's like, no. He rushes back and finds the intern he was going to have sex with. And she's all burned up on half side of her face. And she's like, oh, something terrible happened. There was like this thing. And oh no. And he's like, no, big. And now he's all sad because she's dead. And he's like, I will get you, monster. Come out. And at this point, he's figured out that it's not the Thing. It's the Super Skrull. Yeah, Super Skrull. So if you're not familiar with the Fantastic Four lore, which I'm not really, but the Super Skrull is pretty, I don't say it's pretty iconic, but you see it around. So the Super Skrull is somehow the Skrull, which are like this green alien race, not like, and they're like horrible monsters, unlike in the TV show where they're like sympathetic, like mamacitas who have like traveled to the Rio Grande to protect themselves from Nazis or something. That's portrayed. Anyway, the Super Skrull, they took the powers of the Fantastic Four, so the stretching, the Invisible Woman stuff, light fire, and then being big and tough like the Thing, and crafted them into like this creature. And so the Super Skrull's pretty intense. So now it's like time to fight, and it's like, Sasquatch is in trouble. And so that takes us to, that's the end of like the A plot. The B plot here, I guess, I don't know if I'm using those terms correctly. We go 8 years ago, and we see a young Aurora, and she's like super satapotamus, and she's standing upon the top of like this religious institution where she's going to school. And she's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with this. I'm lonely and sad. And she's only 13 years old, and she's like, that's it. Heavenly Father, please forgive me. I'm done. And so she leaps off this building, and then she starts to fly, and she's like, it's a miracle. And so she does the same thing, but also the worst decision she could possibly make. And she goes and reveals to like the crazy nun lady that she jumped off the building and then she was able to fly. And the lady's like, time for a caning. Yup. So the nun canes her because she's being blasphemous or something and possessed by the devil, and she needs to stop being possessed by the devil. And she gets caned so much in this crazy like boarding school or whatever it's supposed to be this is how she like develops her split personality. Which, okay, sure, whatever. It's not the worst excuse for such a thing to happen. And so his split personality obviously is there's the one who's like a slutty, like I'm going to do whatever I want and fuck your rules and stuff. And then there's the extremely proper. And so at one point she's like transforms, her other personality runs out, probably bangs up a bunch of dudes for a couple days, and like it becomes has her hair long. Oh no, her hair's long. Oh gosh, goodness. And then she comes back. She stumbles back after like being gone for 3 days, being a whore, and then she gets like beat even harder. And eventually she grows up, and she has like the very strict personality, and then she has like the very fun personality, and so that's where that comes from. And she goes back and forth with that. And one night she's out with just kind of like whoring around or whatever, and these guys try to assault her with her sweet tits that are like hanging out of her shirt. Oh, she's so hot, and and then she's kind of fighting them, or no, she doesn't. What happens? Yeah. She uses her abilities for like the first time, it seems. Like besides the flying, she has some like shooting ability thingy. And then another guy, and then Wolverine's like walking by, and he's like, "Hello, what's going on here?" Oh, another thing I forgot to mention about Aurora and North Star is that they're mutants. That's where they get their powers from. Okay. So then there's a guy who pulls out a knife, and she's like kind of freaking out because she doesn't understand her powers or anything. And then Wolverine rolls up, beats the shit out of him, drives him off, um, and then is like, "Hey, darling, you should come join me in Department H or whatever." And she's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "My name's Wolverine. You should come." And then they have like a nice little chat. Wolverine like flirts it up and gets her to come join Department H. So that wraps up that issue. Issue 10, we hop back on over to Sasquatch and his experience with the Super Skrull. But first, we see that James, remember all the way back in like the previous video that I had about Alpha Flight all those many moons ago, him and Heather are moving to New York to work for the Roxxon Corporation, I want to say. So he's checking it out, and he's like, "Wow, New York! Maybe I'll run into Spider-Man, something, something." And he, in fact, as he like signs his lease and walks out of this building that this brownstone he's going to live in, he bumps into Steve Rogers, and the guy's like, "Oh, my bad." And Steve's current hookup, some random hot chick, is like, "What's going on, Stevie? Okay?" And he's like, "Hold on, Bernie. I felt something. That guy must have great power." It's like, okay, thanks, Captain America. So the Vindicator flies around New York and checking stuff out, whatever, and it looks like he's being monitored by some sort of drone. Meanwhile, back up in Canada, the Super Skrulls fighting Sasquatch, who like broke his arm from like a fall or something and messed it up, and he has like concerns about transforming to Sasquatch because it might fuck up his arm like real good forever because of like the way it works. And I'm like, okay, that's not something you've tested before. That seems odd. Anyway, so he's running. He's thinking about like what happened in the previous episode, and he's kind of upset that intern he was going to bang is dead. Then he's able to hide a little bit, and then falls into the snow, and he collapses like into the snow. And the Skrull's like, "Oh, I must have hit him too hard or something." And then all of a sudden, these hands reach up from beneath the ice and grab the Super Skrull and go, "Badam!" Sasquatch is pissed. In fact, he's kind of like going berserk at this point, and so they fight. They have a pretty awesome like shonen anime battle where they're just going back and forth and using powers and powering up and all this stuff. And then the Skrull like bends over and is like, "Oh, my stomach!" And Sasquatch is about to like beat the shit out of him or whatever, like claw him up real good. When the Super Skrull uses some sort of like I don't know what this power is. He uses some sort of eye laser or hypnotic powers to get Sasquatch to stop, and then he thinks about like what occurred previously in other issues. It's like, hey, if you want to know more about this, you should go read this Spider-Man issue and this Captain or Miss Marvel issue and all this stuff, and how he was like sent into space and possessed by some sort of cosmic rays or some nonsense, and he got like deadly space cancer because he like Galactus was involved or something. It's all this crazy stuff. Meanwhile, Sasquatch is not really possessed. In fact, the lasers kind of woke him up from his like battle rage or whatever, and he's like, and he literally is like, "Oh, this guy has some sort of super leukemia." It's like, okay. So then the Skrull wants Sasquatch to help him like build some sort of transporter so he can get back to the Skrull home world, which was destroyed or is being destroyed by Galactus or something, and there he can get like a cure for his super cancer. But since he doesn't realize Sasquatch is just faking mind control, Sasquatch is able to knock him out real good, toss him on this like teleporter they just like built out of scraps, and then he sends him like somewhere else into the universe where he is dead because super cancer gets him. And then Sasquatch like meanders back to his home while thinking about how he needs to figure out how to get control. And he doesn't want to become like the Hulk, where he has no control over his alter half and stuff, and that he needs to like do more meditation or something. So he gets home, and we get this whole like sad story about how he was married. Wait, was he married today? He lives some miles from his mother's house, one of the Merriam Creek. Since a departure, yeah. So his wife and son like left him 5 years ago for some reason that I have no idea. That doesn't explain. And so he does this like weird thing where every time he comes home, he's like, "Hi, honey, I'm home," because it makes him feel sad or something. Only this time, it's like, "Bonjour, ma chérie." And it's like, what? And it's Aurora. That's right. Aurora hooked up with Sasquatch before, and she's back, and she's in her like sexy self. And she's like, "I'm here, and we're going to be together." And he's like, yeah. I mean, actually, he's like kind of concerned. He's like, "Are you, what?" But she's hot, and he's horny, so because his intern died, so awesome. So that wraps up the Sasquatch mini arc inside this bit. And so we head back over to Aurora when she's like joining Department H. And we see Vindicator talking to her while she's wearing like a sexy gymnastics outfit for some reason, about how she's not just her. There's a twin that her brother, this Jean Paul, is, who's like this famous skater that, and there's a whole story about how like her parents like put her in that school because they had to. Hold on, let me see if I can pull this up. It's like a super monologue. Okay, he's your twin brother. Why weren't we adopted by the same family? Because his brother was adopted. It's like, well, the story is your parents put you in that. Oh no. So your parents died, and then the cousins who like adopted John Paul, they couldn't afford to take you too, so they put you in that school, which was government subsidized because they were like super poor, and then they died in like a car accident, and so then he went and entered the foster program, and then he was adopted, but then like these other people who adopted him didn't even know that you like existed or whatever, and she's like super excited about him and that they can like be brother and sister again. And so the department contacts North Star, and he's kind of like an anarchist. Like there's some comment about like, oh, the reason I'd come to Parliament is to bomb it. Like what? There's like, I feel like there's so much backstory that they like these writers like just assume we like know about some of these characters. It's like you're doing an origin story. This guy's talking about like this anarchist kind of stuff, but it's like, and that's it. It's just like a side comment, and it's like, okay, well, that's not bad writing per se. It's just kind of like I want to know more about that. It's like what? So then he meets up with James. James reveals that he's got a twin sister. He's like, no, I believe you. And then he talks about how, like, we know you're a mutant and that you're using your mutant powers because you were just, like, an okay skier. And then now you're, like, a champion. And, like, we're not here to, like, ruin your buzz or anything. Like, you use your powers as you want. Like, this, like, whatever. And then North Star is like, I don't know if I have any interest in this. And then, like, his sexy twin sister comes in and he's like, whoa. And they're like, apparently he's also a beautiful man because she's like, wow, it's like looking into a mirror. And he's like, wow, this is crazy. And so it's like, come on, man, come join us up. And it's like, sure, sounds good. And then they're about to like shake hands, Aurora and North Star. And if you know anything about them, which we just based on the X-Men lore, we know very little. But when they hold hands, they like get super powerful because that's like part of their mutant powers. And so, I don't know. I don't think anything happens, but I was like, oh, here we go. It's going to blow up. And then that just ends that origin story. So nothing happened. So the last issue here, number 11 of this kind of like Alpha Flight arc, we finally get back into like a main story, if you will. And it's interesting because the way this guy's is set up, the manga file or whatever, it like starts a little story, but doesn't go anywhere. So we pick up with Mr. Box, and this guy has like no legs. He was a member of like not Alpha Flight, but one of like the Beta Flight or Gamma Flight or whatever, and he's very technologically whatever, and he's talking to Miss Courtney, about some offer that she's giving him, and then she's like, yes, everything's proceeding as planned. And so this guy tries to call Guardian, who's now Vindicator, right, about like something, because he's got a lot of interesting things, and he's wondering who else this lady like contacted or whatnot. And then he reveals like his suit because he's got some sort of like Iron Man suit that he rolls around in. We then head over to Heather. She's like in the house. Everything's kind of moved out of there. She's like thinking about all the fun times they had about moving to New York. It's a good way to like, a lot of times in these comics, they'll just have like, here's what happened in the last episode, moving on. So this is like more interesting because it kind of like gives a little reveal about everything that's been going on, about why they're moving and whatnot, about his new job. And then she like, you know, selling the card stuff. And then she flies out to New York. And then we flip over to this Miss Courtney lady. Well, not her yet. We flip over to a bunch of these like like Beta Flight, Gamma Flight, and all that characters. And so we can introduce this like cadre of people that have been hired by Miss Courtney, including this Bach guy who they call Wheels. So there's Wheels. Hold on, it gives like a whole introduction. Okay, yeah. So there's they call him Box. Okay, so no, Wheels is not his name. Wheels is what they call him. So Box, the guy we met before, he's a world-class engineer and a mechanic. There's Diamond Lil, who is like a giantess, so she's like super strong and stuff. There's Flashback, who can like summon other like future versions of himself. There's Smart Alec, who is smart. And then there's Wild Child. Wild Child is not a member of one of these groups. He's like a crazy, ugly-looking dude who's just like, he comes up, he rolls up into, not New Mutants. I don't think he ever comes into New Mutants. But he comes into X-Force later when we get to that as one of their main characters. And he's supposed to be like super ugly. He's got like razor sharp teeth. He's kind of like a Wolverine style character, but he's more animalistic. You get into like some crazy stuff way down the line about how they're like Wolverine and Wild Child and Sabretooth and some other characters are like descendants of like wolves or something, while like humans are descendants of apes, right? Something like that. There's like a Robin. Anyway, that's a long time from now. Like, I remember reading that and being like, this is all bullshit, stupid nonsense. Anyway, these all like kind of third tier guys are arguing, and then Wild Child like grabs Flashback and about to like claw his head off because he's got like super. He doesn't have talons, but he has like these claws. His nails are just super sharp. And then Miss Courtney like rolls up and says something about it's this influencer that she's wearing that's causing these people to like obey her or whatnot, how they're going to get together and do something. And then this guy, Jerome Jackson, rolls in and he's got some real beef with James McDonald, aka Vindicator, aka the Guardian. And he wants to destroy Alpha Flight for some reason because they crushed his dreams or something. So then Guardian, is he going by Guardian now? I thought he was going by Vindicator. It says Guardian here. Okay. Anyway, he's going to pick up his wife from the airport, so he heads over there. She's not around. He's like, have you seen this like hot redhead with glasses who's like 10 years younger than me? And they're like, oh yeah, we saw her. She was around here. Some guy in a wheelchair that came picked her up. Oh yeah, and he dropped this card, and he picks it up, and he sees Roxxon, the company that he's supposed to be working for, and then Jerome Jackson. He's like, oh shit. That's all these years later. And so he flies off, and we get no other explanation about that. It's just that they have beef, apparently. So he heads back over to Manhattan from like one of the airports. I'm assuming JFK, based on the fact that he's coming in from Brooklyn, it looks like. So he gets there, and then he gets like a telepathic message or something, and it's, attention Guardian, I have your wife. Holding her on this side of the building, blah, blah, blah. So he breaks into like the two towers or whatever. Well, he burns his way through like a window to kind of be quietopotamus. And then he sees Jerome on a monitor, and he's like, you want to get in the elevator and come. So he's like, oh man, this is a trap. So he goes in there, and he's thinking about Alpha Flight and all this stuff, and he's thinking about should he call everybody. And then all of a sudden, like out of the blue, he's like standing in this like this tiny looking elevator, like literally like a one person elevator, and then he just like pops up into this room. I don't know, it's kind of interesting choice of transitions. And then all like these people are dressed up in like uniforms or whatnot, like Diamond Lil and stuff, and then Wild Child or Guardian's like looking shocked. And then Wild Child's like, we are Omega Flight. Dun, dun, dun. And we leave it at that until we pick up with Alpha Flight, I don't know, months later. We'll get there someday. And then we get the introduction of Sasquatch, where we get his like origin story. So we see him. He's thinking about how he worked with Bruce Banner in college, and they're working on Gamma, and then Bruce Banner became the Hulk because of the Gamma bomb thing. And this guy's got like a new experiment that it's like almost ready for him to try to use it to try to cure like his eyesight or something, or his like broken knee or something. So he hooks himself up to this thing, and then he uses it, and then it just happens to be at the same time there's like an Aurora Borealis, and it causes some sort of problem with like the injection of like the gamma rays or whatever, and his whole body like tears apart and then gets reformed into Sasquatch, and he goes in like a bloody, he just like rampages. And then we flip over to Snowbird, and so at this point Lang Kwiatkowski is somehow tied in with Alpha Flight and James Hudson, because I guess they're paying for like these experiments or not, and they haven't heard from him in like a day, right? Daily report. So Snowbird shows up, sees the whole thing like blasted and torn apart, and then she thinks about how like she warned that this is like a sacred area with a lot of magical powers or something, and said they shouldn't have set up the site there because it would have caused problems, and it did cause problems. So then she starts tracking Sasquatch and is like wandering around, and then she sees Lankowski or whatever crashed out in the snow looking like he's almost dead. And he's like freezing, and she's like, let me help you. So she picks him up, takes him over to Michael Two Youngsman. And a bit later, James is like chatting with him about like how he transformed into a monster, and how he was like a Sasquatch or an orange monster instead of like a green monster, and something about cosmic rays mixing with the Aurora Borealis and like something. And then Michael's like, oh, you're very lucky that Snowbird found you. And he's like, yeah, I'll be okay. And he's all jacked up with like his legs wrapped up and whatnot. And then something about how his body's been merged with like magical and gamma irradiation or stuff. And then Snowbird like rolls in through the window. It's like, hold up, I got some more to say about this. She's like, I am also a metamorph, as you are now a metamorph, and so I will teach you how to tame your beast so that you do not become overcome by him and turn into like the Hulk. And then he's like, good, now we can go. And like, James, what are you doing? He's like, I'm gonna go try to get Wolverine back. And so that leads back into like the X-Men issue 109, I want to say, or 1010, somewhere in there. And then he's like, oh, what are you gonna call him? And he's like, I'm gonna call him Sasquatch, haha. And that wraps up this arc. So fun stuff. Another fun grandiose adventure with good old Alpha Flight there. The importance of being deadly is the name of the ring. All right, cool. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.